Senator Lee.
Thank you. I'll be as quick as I can. Just a couple of questions. First, Director McConkey, it's hard to fully evaluate any bill without assessing the meaningful benefits that come from the bill. And each year, the Sitla Trust Fund distributes millions of dollars to support public schools and some other institutions across Utah. How will this exchange in particular further that mission?
Thank you for the question. It allows us to block up land that, due to its scattered nature or the location in more remote areas with less development potential, it allows us to block that up and really be able to generate revenue to the extent that we should be generating revenue. It allows us to utilize that land the way it was intended, and it helps us, but as we've also talked about, it helps economic development in some of these rural communities. As you mentioned in your opening statements, more than the majority of land in Utah is actually owned by the federal government. And when you look at rural Utah, when you take out the Wasatch Front, which is the most heavily populated, it's even a much higher number than that. San Juan County only has about 6% of the land that's in private ownership. So this is an opportunity for the school children of the state to make money, as these lands were intended to do. And it also allows local economic development. It puts us into areas where we can look at renewable energy projects, oil and gas, critical minerals, real estate development, all of those things. These targets, a lot of time was spent figuring out, working with industry, working with experts, working with local communities, figuring out what would be best for us and for these local communities.
Thank you. And Dr. Hutline, I've got one question for you as well. Thank you for being here and testifying today. The state of Utah has identified some plots of land that would be appropriate for conveyance from a number of locations from the BLM to the state to provide for more adequate management. A number of these parcels are either completely placed entirely within or alternatively directly adjacent to some of our state parks, including Antelope Island State Park and Wasatch Mountain State Park. These plots would be better managed by the Utah Department of Natural Resources, as the land surrounding the parcels is already designated as a state park and managed well, as all of our state parks are. This would allow the streamlining of maintenance of land management to state agencies who can be much more responsive with unique needs. It also seems to me that the conveyances would be a win-win for Utah and the federal government. It benefits both parties. It'd allow the state to take the lead on resource management, such as maintenance and wildfire management in places where the state's already operating, while allowing the federal government to focus on more pressing land management objectives that only it can perform. Now, in your testimony, you talked about the land management difficulties that BLM deals with because of the federal ownership of these isolated parcels within Antelope Island State Park and near Wasatch Mountain State Park. Could you speak to some of those land management challenges and what they are?
Certainly. I'd be happy to speak to those, Senator, and I would like to say to open that obviously, and it's reflected in our testimony, that the BLM does support this bill for many of the reasons that you just described. Some of the scattered parcels, they just present a management challenge in trying to perform some type of federal management action, given all of the edge effect of the adjacent, in this case, state ownership, or in many other cases, private ownership, which can complicate and add to the complexity of actually performing actions on those parcels of land. So we do view this as a win-win situation, as you described, and are fully supportive.
Great. Thank you. I look forward to working with BLM and the Forest Service on the implementation language of the bill, and hope we can work together on a solution that solves these management issues. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.